you can see an impossible dissection. I have tried this. Now maybe it's easier on a living person, but you can't do this on a cadaver. I have tried it. This shows you the periosteum around the calcified matrix. Y'all notice the pine trees here, the compact bone? So I've torn this away so that you can learn how it's really connected. Can you see those little white pieces in there? These are called perforating or Sharpie's fibers, and they actually anchor the periosteum to the lamellae, to the bony matrix. They anchor it in the same way. Here's the analogy that will help you remember this, because teeth look just like this. The periodontal ligaments look just like this in the maxilla and mandible. You peel this away. These are, in fact, collagenous ropes that are connected into the matrix, which makes it impossible to pull it away this way. And here's the analogy that will help you. And I may have used this already. I can't remember what I say and what I don't say. The analogy that helps me best here is to think about connecting two pieces of concrete. Whenever the concrete guys come in and there's an existing piece of concrete, they don't just, if they want there to be like a pad, they don't just put boards down and pour concrete next to this one, because what will happen over time? They'll separate from each other. So what do? They get a drill and they drill holes into the existing concrete, and they drive steel rebars into the existing concrete, and then they let that stick out into the new piece, and they pour the new concrete over that rebar, and those steel connectors hold the two pieces together. That is exactly the way the Sharpie's fibers do this. The new concrete here would be the periosteum, and they are drilled into the matrix of the bone, hanging on to it. This is also why it's so hard to get a tooth out of your mouth. Same kind of connection here. And remember, collagen, that's what these Sharpie's fibers are, is gram for gram stronger than steel. So it's a very secure connection for the periosteum around the bony matrix. All right, so the articular cartilage I've explained, the periosteum I've explained around the bone. You know about compact and spongy bone. We've listed and talked about those before. All right, now the last piece for the bone is to talk about, for the anatomy piece here, is to talk about its vascularization and how you keep the osteocytes alive. So if I had a piece of bone and I had a piece of cartilage, and I asked a young person who doesn't know any anatomy, which of these two do you think is the most is the most viable, the most living, the most resilient, the most alive tissue? Is it this soft piece of cartilage here, or is it this hard piece of bone? And most people say the cartilage is the soft piece, that's the living piece, and the bone, that's the dead piece. You know already that cartilage served as our illustration for connective tissues that are very poorly vascularized. So I made this point when we talk about cartilage damage, like in a knee. If the tendon or ligament is stretched, it can heal. Dense regular connective tissue is highly vascularized. It's much more difficult for a menisci or a piece of articular cartilage or labrums that are found in your hips and your shoulders to heal because they're so poorly vascularized. Cartilage is an illustration of a connective tissue that is poorly vascularized. And then I said, now, if you in fact had both the menisci moved from your knees, would it in fact be bone on bone? And you already knew the answer to this because I introduced cartilage to you. You said no. It would be the articular cartilage of the femur on the articular cartilage of the tibia. It would be cartilage to cartilage. So really, in our knees right now, it's hyaline on this side, hyaline on this side, and fibrocartilage in the middle. It's cartilage, cartilage, cartilage. Take the fibrocartilage out, it's still cartilage to cartilage. Okay, but that's not the way it was designed. And so after a while, the articular cartilage on the ends is going to rub off. And then it's going to be bone on bone. And it won't be long before you have to have a knee replacement. How are you going to know that? Well, the pain, certainly. But there's going to be swelling in the knee, and when they draw some of that synovial fluid out, what will be in the fluid that tells them the cartilage is gone? What will be in the fluid that tells them the cartilage is gone? What?
Chondrocytes?
Blood.
Yeah. Blood will be there. There'll be blood there. And the reason is the cartilage is not vascularized. But guess what is? The bone is. The bone is highly vascularized. Okay, so let's learn the connections for the blood within the bone. So I'll do this one more time in the development of the bone to show you how the blood vessels get in there. But on this picture, I want you to see, I want you to learn the anatomy specifically for the purpose of supplying blood to the cells of the bone. There's no question that there's no doubt that more than half, 55–60% of this bone is in fact hardened calcified salts. So how in the world are you going to keep the cells that are in this calcified matrix viable? You say they're receiving blood supply. Really? This whole mass here is a hardened matrix. How are you going to get liquid through there? Okay, so that's the point of this, to show you. All right, so first of all, notice you can see that blood vessels are found within the periosteum, and when we do the development, we'll bring it in, bring the blood vessels in for you. And you can see the blood vessels then from within the periosteum, the blood vessels will actually protrude. They'll stick through the calcified matrix through little canals. So these are important canals. They're called Volkmann's canals, or perforating canals, that connect all of the pine trees to each other. So it's like you've got a whole bundle of pine trees together, and they're wrapped with something, and then somebody has drilled holes, channels, through the pine trees horizontally, so that you can connect, in this case, you can connect the blood supply. So these are called the perforating or Volkmann's canals. Notice that as the blood supply passes from within the periosteum through Volkmann's canals, that it then turns and runs vertically, up and down, through each individual pine tree, through a canal in the center of it called the haversian, the central or the haversian canal. So the blood supply runs, it comes through the perforatings, it runs up and down through the haversian canals, and then notice, between each of the pine trees, there are numerous Volkmann's canals connecting them to each other. So the blood supply from the outside of the bone gets through the Volkmann's canals, and then these Volkmann canals actually connect the inner workings of the bone. So each haversian system, each pine tree in the illustration, has an artery, a vein and a nerve. It has an artery running through the center of it that has blood supply in it. Now, we still haven't solved the problem then for the blood supply within these small vessels in the haversian canal with connecting to the individual osteocytes. These are the cells that are laying down the bony matrix. So you can see here in the picture, the all-important connectors between the blood supply and the haversian canal are these microscopic little canals called canaliculi, or singular, the canaliculus. Microscopically small canals connecting each layer. Each lamella is connected to its next layer by these little canals. The osteocytes that are embedded in each matrix level, and each lamellae that are laying down the bone, those osteocytes grow arms that extend through those canaliculi to the next layer on either side. So this osteocyte is growing arms through its canaliculi into the haversian canal. It's also growing arms into the canaliculi connecting to the next lamellar layer. And so same thing for this osteocyte, and same thing for this osteocyte. Now, the fact that there's a canal there and that there are cells in there really doesn't solve the problem for us. The question now becomes, how does this cell stay alive? And the answer is, each of the arms of the osteocytes that extend through the canaliculi make gap junction connections with the cells in the next layer. Now, do y'all remember the anatomy of the gap junction? Tight junctions are really tight. Nothing gets through there. In the stratum spinosum, we had bars with knobs on the end called desmosomes. And in cardiac muscle and the reproductive system, I use illustrations, we have cells that have PVC pipes connecting the two, holes between one cell and the next. This is why the cardiac muscle is able, to contract as a syncytium. Yes? A single unit, because each cytoplasm of each cardiac muscle cell is connected to its neighbor. That is the way the osteocytes are connected. So what this cell is picking up here, it's delivering to the next layers. So to say it's highly vascularized, to say that osteocytes are extremely healthy cells and supplied all the time, is an accurate statement. Okay, central canals, lamellae, osteocytes, spongy, compact, perforating canals. This is the anatomy, the microscopic structure of bone. All right, now, last two things for the bone, and then we'll talk about some bone fractures for a few minutes because that's fun, are the way you make bone. There are two general processes for making bone. One of them is called intramembranous ossification, and the other one is called endochondral ossification. So, generally speaking, I hate embryology for this reason. You can't nail these people down. Generally speaking, bones that are made this way do not use cartilage as their models. So these are the flat bones, basically, in your skeleton. So a skull would be a great illustration of a bone that's made this way by intramembranous ossification. And it happens like this. An ossification center appears in the fibrous connective tissue membrane. Now see why I hate embryology? So the brain is developing in the fetus, and you notice as it develops that there is a thick fibrous connective tissue that develops around the head. Now there's all kinds of names for that in embryology. I don't care, really. I could have just as easily made up those names. It's a connective tissue membrane around the brain. And I'll tell you this, that's where the osteoblasts are going to go to make the skull bone. They're going to come through the blood supply into that connective tissue sheet and begin laying down bony matrix. So the bony matrix then here is secreted within that fibrous membrane. The osteoblasts arrive by way of the circulatory system. And then, I love this, the woven bone and the periosteum form. I'm a physiology guy. I see statements like this and I say, well, where did that come from? How did that work? Why did it go there? So these are questions about embryology where there just aren't answers to these questions. The woven bone appears there, and there's a periosteum that appears. The periosteum is the connective tissue that's going to be around the bone. Okay, so that appears first. And then you get this bone collar that begins to form of compact bone, and then the red marrow starts to appear, the reticular tissue in the middle of it. If you do not like this, it's probably because your teacher also does not like this. But I cannot leave you being unaware of bones being made this way. This is called intramembranous ossification. It is the way your skull bones are made. Now, the fun one is this one. Okay, this one's better. This is the way you make a long bone in your body. The long bones in your body are made by endochondral ossification. And you know this already. If if you look at the long bone of a 6-week-old embryo, you know it's going to be all cartilage. Now here's what happens. This cartilaginous model, over the next few weeks, begins to develop a collar, a bone collar around the diaphysis. So some of this story actually makes sense to me. The bone collar starts to develop here. It does so because of the arrival of osteoblasts. Just like an intramembranous, the blood supply brings the osteoblasts here. Where did they come from? How did they get there? Okay. The story does get better, however. The periosteal bone collar forms here around the diaphysis of the bone. And what was a spongy piece of tissue now gets hard in the middle, at least on the edges. Now cartilage, since it is so poorly vascularized, the chondrocytes within cartilage pieces normally get a lot of what they need by being squeezed through the perichondriums, through the membranes. So you don't find blood vessels in there, so it's good for cartilage to get mashed in the synovial fluid. That's a way of getting what it needs into the chondrocytes. But now that becomes much more difficult. The diffusion of nutrient through the diaphysis becomes very difficult now when this bone collar forms. You can't get it through the bone like you could through the perichondrium. And so it's good, so it makes sense. The chondrocytes within the diaphysis of the bone swell up in an unhealthy way, start to die. Now, there's still this nice looking healthy hyaline cartilage on the ends of the bones, but the cartilage in the shaft of the bone starts to look sick. And along about the same time, there are blood vessels that will innervate, that will stick through this, this bone collar and deliver blood. The blood vessels then grow in the periosteum and they begin to build these perforating canals already. Now at this point they are actually into the cartilage. And so if you watch this as it happens in time, you will see that the middle of the diaphysis begins to get hard. The blood vessels have brought with them from the bone collar into the center of the bone osteoblasts that are making bone. And so the bone begins to develop from the middle out. These are called primary ossification centers. Bones develop from the middle out. The long bones do. Now the next major event that occurs is the the vascularization of the epiphyses with the same phenomenon. Osteoblasts are delivered to the epiphysis of the bone, and secondary ossification centers are formed on the ends. And so at this point what you've got is hyaline cartilage on the edges here, hyaline cartilage on the other side of the ossification center, then bone, then hyaline cartilage, then ossification centers, then hyaline cartilage. And so you have bone growing from the inside out. Now you've got bone producing centers on the outside, but there's cartilage on either sides of those. The secondary ossification centers are not nearly as robust as the osteoblasts of the primary ossification centers, and you can see that happening here. The secondary ossification centers sort of just fill in, while the primary ossification center really chases down the cartilage. So at this point, you've got two places where the bone's being made, in the epiphysis and in the diaphysis. Primary ossification center came first, secondary ossification center next. Now, this picture of a bone right here is a good shot of a child's bone. Elementary, junior high age. This is a very good picture here, showing a robust piece of bone here, a nice large chunk of cartilage in the middle, and a nice thick piece of cartilage on the edge, on the outside. So children, up through their puberty years, you worry about them breaking long bones in this location. These locations are called the epiphyseal plates, or the epiphyseal disc. Ultimately, they become the epiphyseal lines. But these are the places where long bone growth actually occurs. The truth is, bone growth is actually cartilage growth. Now, let me show you. This is a blow up of that spot right here. So this is in the epiphyseal disc. This is the bony tissue of the epiphysis. So how else could I label that? The bony tissue of the epiphysis. Primary or secondary ossification center? Secondary ossification center. Here's some nice, beautiful hyaline cartilage here. Now notice here, I've got cartilage right here. Oh, incidentally, is this the top of this picture? What would be on this side of it? More cartilage. Good. What would we call that cartilage? Ultimately, that's going to be articular cartilage. Yes. So here's your hyaline cartilage right here, nice healthy hyaline cartilage, and here is where the bone is growing. The chondrocytes, through this second layer here, because of the activity of several different things, a whole bunch of different things act here. Growth hormone, thyroid hormone, different vitamins, growth factors. Because of the work of all this stuff going on here, related to the sex hormone secretions, you get chondrocytes that line up in columns. You can see the columns of these chondrocytes lined up here. And their numbers grow tremendously. And if you have more chondrocytes, what do you have being made by those chondrocytes? Cartilage. And so more chondrocytes means more cartilage matrix. So you're spewing out collagen like crazy and building the mass of the bone in this area right here, where these cells are undergoing mitosis. You're actually building the amount of material there. Now, at the same time that the sex hormones and the growth hormones and the thyroid hormones are all doing their job here with the chondrocytes, they're also stimulating the osteoblast of the primary ossification center. And so what happens during puberty is there's a race between the matrix being made by the chondroblast or chondrocytes and the bone being made by the osteoblast. They're both activated. So what happens is, I'll finish here and we'll pick this up on Wednesday. What happens is, when the osteoblast finally catches the chondrocytes, it's growing out into them. While the matrix is growing, the osteoblasts are growing into them. When it finally catches them, the thing seals. And this is what we call a growth plate right here, or an epiphyseal line. This is where the primary ossification center caught the chondroblast dividing, and the bone was completed growing. Growth is now over for this bone. So this happens normally late in puberty. Okay, so we'll pick that up. One last review of this, and then a few other little tidbits on Wednesday. And then I will leave most of the class for you on Wednesday for review. No question asked is a stupid one. So if you come with any question that you might have, you're preparing for your exam on Friday, most of Wednesday's class will be designated to you. Ask questions about the test on Friday. I have just a few more little tidbits here to finish the presentation. Yes.
Are you gonna put
Oh yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah, maybe we'll do that after class on Wednesday because everybody will feel confident, and you can use that as a kind of way to